Hello, Neppers. It is I, Wild Neptune, bringing you the info you all need for RTA Season 4. It's going to be a rundown of the units and where I think they're going to fall, starting for Season 4 in RTA. This is taken at a high champ legend perspective. Also, Paka. Nobody is gonna be able to see high YouTube because the overlay isn't on the screen. Although I guess since I pointed it out, everybody knows you said it. Brief rundown of the tiers. Meta are units that basically run RTA. They are units that I feel probably deserve some sort of nerf. Honestly, they're just really, really strong. Priority picks are picks that are either picked really early on in drafts and are overall just strong picks in general, or ones that can be picked later but are so strong that you have to consider other people picking them up with your earlier picks. So strong picks are picks that are strong, like priority picks might be as strong as them, but have slightly less meta, game warping abilities. Situational picks are picks that usually come into play only when other specific units are picked up from the enemy team. So think like counter picks or, pocket picks go here. Niche is only fits against certain scenarios. Basically like composition counters. Rare is things you might see every once in a while, right? I just put it here because I see that they can be decent, but you probably should, if you're like a new player, you probably should not pick them. Cleave are just units that are only used in cleave teams, basically. Don't pick, think that should be obvious. And need more info, I also think that should be obvious too. I don't know enough about the unit to place them anywhere else. I'm going to also rephrase niche, also where it can be units that you can use, but only if you have a specific playstyle and the composition very well. So there are units here that not a lot of people use, but I do know some players who do use them, but that's only because the unit fits what their playstyle and what they do. And in general, if other people use those units with their current build for the rest of their team, it won't be as good for them because their gearing and stuff isn't fit for that playstyle. But we'll be going down, from it starts in alphabetical, and it stops being alphabetical down at the bottom. But let's get into it with the Katies. Okay. Also, this is also based on, I don't know if they're gonna change the frenzy. Here, this is gonna be based on the assumption they are not going to change Frenzy. If they do change Frenzy, this whole list is worthless. Not all of it's worthless, right? But it would definitely have changes. Keep in mind too that after I say the first like couple weeks to a month of RTA, the tier list will probably look a lot different because the meta, especially the high champ legend meta, changes pretty quickly because people are always looking to counter other things. But lower, as you get lower, I feel like the good units typically stay good, like the really good units, and the bad units stay like the bad units. Okay, but here we go. Arcades. Right now, Soul Weavers, even after like a slight resurgence, are pretty hard to fit in. Arcades is basically a very niche pick. So I'm actually gonna change niche to counter. Sounds a little bit better. So only to stop certain compositions, right? In the Katie's case, it's low like damage teams with medium strength AoE. Normally has to be drafted with with like 2 knights and a unit that can carry into Frenzy. Adlai is at the moment I believe a don't pick. For like a very brief amount of time, he was used as anti-cleave, but there are just better anti-cleave units right now. And cleave has kind of adapted to him. Adventurer Roz is... Okay. This is like the first difficult one, because he has early last season, he would have been here. Like, easily. Now he's, like, kind of in between. I'm gonna put him in the strong category. He brings a lot to your team. Defense break, dual attack with defense buff, and everything like that. It's just that one of the reasons he's not picked as much is there are just so many good knights that are in the game. I might merge these 2 categories depending on how many units go in here. What's her name? Inos. Yeah. Well, when you can't remember a unit's name, that's a pretty good indication of how good the character is. Ains, Aether. Okay. Alexia. Alexia has definitely fallen off a bit. She's definitely now more of a situational pick. Basically only seen if the other team has like heavy buffs on their team and you need like a backup stripper, or if they have like, you know, a couple of water units like SSB plus another one, and you want to try to punish them that way. Otherwise, and even with stripping, there are just better strip units like right now. So like Bazaar, Bryceria, stuff like that basically do a job only a little bit better, and both of them are a little bit better in the meta. But she's definitely been hit the hardest. Well, she's one of the hardest hit units by the frenzy change that happened. So, Alexia, Wanda. Okay, here we go. Taiwan is a meta unit. Although I would say, out of the Golden Boys, I do think Taiwan is the most manageable of them. Where you could feasibly, I could feasibly move him down here, but I think he's like just strong enough to be in the meta category, which does also give away that all the other Golden Boys will be in the meta tier. In a vacuum, I think the only two that are like actually problematic are Emil Ball and Emil Crow, and I'll talk about why when I get to them. But like as a package, there's no way it doesn't belong in the meta category. The big thing is his passive is pretty good, you know, so you can't like reliably stick debuffs on his team. But let's be honest, it's the Soulburn S3 that is the thing that they should probably address at some point. 10 souls is just too much. Not too much. I mean, like I say, it's too good for the Soulburn. Like putting it at 20 souls or reducing the amount of turns that it takes off the cooldown by 1 would make him like definitely not as good. Like that change would actually probably drop him down to here, right? I think healthy units fall like in these 3 categories, and then some units obviously will be counter picks. Hey, Momo. She's about the same as Acades, honestly. So actually, I'm gonna add one more tier. Oh wait, below. I see Momo here. It's gonna be called the budget tier. There's a tier. Whoops. Okay, so move Momo down here. So budget. Just stuff like you don't have anything else to use. Momo's okay, right? I'll put Adelaide here too. This isn't gonna really apply to people who are like, you know, higher ranks, but if you're, you know, just casually playing, one hit like Masters, and the situation arises where you had to use one of these units, they're not awful, right? Angelica is a right now is a she's not even a counter pick anymore. But she's kind of a counter pick. Most Angelicas I see now are not for countering Arby, even though sometimes she does that too. A lot of them are just for having an attack buff and a dual attack on a character, right? That wants to go like hyper offense. But for this list, she's a counter pick. Hey Robbie. Okay, I said Alexia was hurt the most by the frenzy changes. That was a lie. Robbie was definitely probably hurt the most by the frenzy changes. I say right now she's a rare unit. She's... You know you're a rare unit in RTA when I think I've seen less APOC Ravis late last season than a Katie's and Angelica. Like that's and I don't even really play a lot of teams that are like necessarily weak against these two. So the fact that APOC Ravi just isn't picked is a pretty good indication. Although there are like certain compositions she might be decent against. Okay. Fireman. Okay, Arby. Arby goes up here. The only reason, so like, Arbiter Vildred is a unit that can take over a match if given the chance to. All of his builds that people run right now are strong, and you always have to consider, like, is my team weak or strong against Arbiter Vildred, right? No matter where you are in the draft. The only reason he doesn't go up here is because Arbiter Vildred has a plethora of counter picks and counterplay in the game right now, and because of that, like he's not a brainless pick like some other units might be. So even though he does have like match winning capabilities, he does have enough counterplay where he does drop down a tier from meta. Green Armin. Probably like she can. I'll be nice to her. She can go into budget. She has that shield, a blind, a heal. If you don't have like other good knight, okay, honestly, because she's a knight, I'm gonna drop it down to don't pick. There are simply there are too many good knights to pick like any knight that isn't meta besides maybe like a couple of them. Anywhere but like, you know, in budget. Alright, Acid is a counter pick. So basically just to speed contest. Honestly. Holy too, same thing. And also the days of like tank buster Holies are gone, I believe. I don't really see them being used as much anymore, especially because the current knight teams just have so much AoE that doesn't really matter for Holy being stealth now. Alots, Cleave. Does have some usage outside of Cleave, like very rarely, but that really wasn't a thing last season, so Azalea. Fireball. Here's put it right here. Bikin. Probably should not pick her either. Alright, Bazaar. Bazaar is at the moment very strong in RTA. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are a lot of passives like from artifacts like Guiding Light that that really are problematic if they keep going off, and Bazaar's unbuffable really helps with that. He's also good against some other meta units like FCC, Emil Crow, obviously. I think he goes here. He's really good, but I don't think he's quite as good enough to go up into meta. But he is probably, I think right now Bazaar is at the strongest he's ever been in RTA. And the fact that I'm not putting him in meta, and I'm only putting him with Arby, because he doesn't have meta shaping capabilities. He's strong in because of what these units are up here, right? If you want to know how fast Bazaars are, typically they range anywhere from in upper tiers, 250 is probably the slowest. I'd say. Maybe not the slowest, but you see between 250 to 280. Typically. But ones at the slower end are definitely a little more common now. A lot of that is because you don't really have to be that fast anymore, because teams that are running Bazaar aren't running them for speed checks. They're running them for to counter units that probably aren't going to be that fast. And you also want to have health on him because of all the true damage coming out. Basque, Batiste. Watch a Shuri is... Put him in Cleave. Although, even as a speed imprint, he's not really used as much now. Bromine is a budget pick. Bromine's big thing right now, and it's always been like that, is that he's not consistent. He's not consistent enough to ever be anything but at the best situational, right? But even now, he's not even there yet. There's just too much RNG in his kit. So there's and not quite enough upside if you land that RNG. BBK, budget pick. She can be decent in certain situations, but they're just better DPS in the game. Emil can. Yeah, counter BBK is a real build I mean, a lot of people will have MO4s, right? The only that aren't going budget are like MO5s. So Emil can like skeets the line between counter and rare. Emil can right now, you have to have 1, extremely good gear for him, and 2, you have to have very specific gear for him. Right now, the build for him is ER. Which means that you probably wanted like a self-imprint on him too, because the self-imprint is ER. He's actually decent at countering stuff like a Taiwan now. Also okay with G-Fergus if you don't really care about him, you know, being, getting pushed by the counterattack. But I have definitely had some matches where I try to use him against, you know, stuff like a Taiwan, and it worked pretty, you know, it worked pretty good, if I'm honest. The main issue is that just Mo Ken by himself isn't enough. You definitely need, like, to build a team around Mo Ken countering that setup. But he's not like, he's very strong in a particular pocket. And the only reason why he's not like higher up is because some units like well, we'll get to that later, but yeah, but there are a lot of units that just stop what he does a little bit too hard. Price area. Right now, Price area is a strong pick. She is. Her ability, her like accuracy up ability, is very good now, especially because of a lot of MLDBs that are running around these days. Her extra damage she has after the hit is nice. The unbuffable she brings on the S3 is also pretty good. She's not as good as she was earlier last season because of how much more common like a Taiwan has gotten, but just the fact that she can maybe do things like stop a set of buffs from coming up right away is pretty useful. Ripperis, Karen Rose, Carrot, Cartuja, Iseria, 5 Cecilia. Okay, so theoretically, 5 Cecilia should go here. But in like from experience, I don't really see it picked at all, which is the problem, right? I guess I could put it here. Her kit is pretty good. She gives immunity. She has AoE provoke, attack down, stuff like that on AoEs. She's the main issue is that she's a knight. And there's just so many good knights in the game. So let's cleave. Celine. Celine is obviously a counter pick to cleave teams. Or at times she's picked against like just teams with heavy non-attack skills to maybe try to stop what they're doing. Right now, the only build I think for Celine is max damage. So there was a time when building her like faster with less damage was advisable, but that's gone. Right now, you just want to ensure that you get a kill if her passive procs. Alright, Cerise. I'm actually gonna move it down to here. Now, Cerise is really strong, but she is, and the only reason why she might move up here is because she is picked sometimes against Fergus to stop his CR push, but that's like the only real consideration to move her up a tier. She's definitely not as strong as Bazaar or Arby at the moment. A lot of that has to do too with that the Bazaar pretty much counters her, and she's also not that great into stuff like a Taiwan MO Crow at the moment, and the composition she was good in early last season aren't as good right now, and even stuff like Fairy Tail has definitely fallen off because players have built the units around countering those compositions. But Cerise still brings a lot to the table. You know, the dual attack, restrict, speed down, the stun, everything like that. She can definitely help facilitate a good offensive strategy. Also going to be using cleave, obviously, but she's used enough in not cleave where she can go up here. Okay, Shermia is a rare pick. There are a couple of players who do use a Shermia in upper echelon of play. Do I recommend you do this? No, I do not. But most of the time they'll be on they'll be on the S1 EE that has a bonus chance to attack twice, and sometimes they'll be on counter. Actually, I think most of the time they're on counter. So it's a really meme build, but Cdom, cleave, obviously, Cicerado. I think so. Out of all the counter picks in the game, Cicerado is among the strongest right now. There are just a lot of debuffers that exist. And see a lot of debuffers? Well, Cicerado is pretty good. Now, he's not like you always take him against debuffers, right? But he's usually pretty safe if you know how to draft around the stuff that counters him, like Rowana, Emil Crow, stuff like that. Charles is a don't pick. So the reason with Charles, well, the problem with Charles is that he's in a 4v4 format. He doesn't quite do enough to justify us picking him for a slot. Other teams can either just sustain through his damage and kill him, or he just won't do enough initial damage. And unless he procs literally every single time on like every single like unit, he's not gonna push a win. Now, can he do that occasionally? Yes, right? It's like a lot of the units here, not a lot of them, but some of the units here can win you the game, right? But generally, they're not. Fire Charlotte is situational at the moment. A big thing with Fire Charlotte now is that you either have to have Emil Crow and G Fergus and have like the other ones and have the other one banned or like not picked together, because my god, he is so bad into G Fergus / Emil Crow. But if those units are not in the match, Fire Charlotte is actually pretty good. She just dishes out a lot of damage, and from what I understand, her builds aren't that hard to make. So like, if you're a player who doesn't really have the best gear in the world, you can probably like bulk up a Fire Charlotte a little bit. You don't really need crit chance because of her the way her kit works, and you can start doing some work with her. Her best artifacts are Justice for All for the buffs and Holy Sack, because even though she's a knight, she's pretty squishy. Okay, Shu. Shu's the first one I'm gonna put in need more info. I know she was buffed, but I don't know how she is now after the buff. Right? A lot of this has to do with the fact that she was buffed like after the season, basically, or like right near the end of it. So nobody has really had a chance to see her in action. Okay, Clarissa. Fire Coley. Imagine a Fire Coley. Alright, Fire Maya is we'll put her in counter pick. She's not as good as she was. Like, Fire Maya was really good for like a very short period of time, like a couple of weeks, but she's definitely fallen off a bit. A lot of it has to do too with the fact that there aren't as many squishy dark units that are being picked these days, besides Arby and like Bryceria, right? But she's not even then, she's not like as good against some of the builds. So, if you have her, fine. She's like she's a little bit difficult. She's a little bit difficult to build while maintaining like decent stats. at the right now. Alright, Armin, or like Crimson Armin. Okay, this is another character that was buffed, and... Okay, theoretically, I don't think she's that great. The only real benefit she has now is the immunity, right? She also has the passive damage reduction too, which is really nice against, you know, Emil Crow and other true damage. But I don't think it's quite enough. The reason is that she doesn't like, she's not a threat. A lot of the knights that are used right now are either a threat in damage, or they have a lot of utility, or both. Right? And what's a utility? I mean utility that increases, you know, damage a lot of the times, or they just do damage by themselves. See, Armin doesn't do any of that stuff, and so I'm gonna put it here. She's not a don't pick, but there were just better things. Dark Corvus. You probably should not pick him. Like, even the players who used a lot of Dark Corvus before don't really pick him anymore. Frenzy has definitely hurt him a lot. Now, out of all the units on this list in Don't Pick, he has the most game-winning potential. But again, in general, he's probably gonna lose you a lot more games if you pick him than he wins. And you have to really know your team and your opponent's team to have like any semblance of a chance. Destina is basic, same thing, a counter pick. She's a counter pick for debuffers, obviously. Her most common build is going to be heavy ER at the moment. DN is situational, like bordering on rare, but she's like kind of in between situational and rare, right? It just depends how nice I want to be to her. She's definitely used more than these 4 units, but she's definitely used, but I also think she's used less than Alexia and even Fire Charlotte. It's just really hard for Soul Weavers, or like, you know, stuff like that to exist at the moment. But because of her attack buff and her other buffs too, if she is picked, a lot of the time she's actually the ban. She's usually only picked last as like a force ban, because if left unchecked, a DN will probably win you the match if your team is constructed well. she just gives so much sustain combined with, you know, the attack buff and everything like that. And her cycle is really good too. Fire Dingo. Dizzy. We'll put Dizzy in, okay. The End's here, and Dizzy's definitely seen less play than the End recently. Dizzy's honestly she's almost a don't pick. And the reason for that is that Dizzy is extremely weak against the top units in the meta right now. You know, Emil Crow, A Taiwan, G Fergus, stuff like that. And she's also countered by, like, all of the anti-debuffers that have come out because of stuff like Fairy Tail. And she's also really bad against, like, stuff like, Rowana, all the counter RBs running around. So Dizzy is in a pretty bad spot right now, to the point where she's not quite a don't pick, because like I see a lot of like maybe lower ranked players, that's the only thing you have is a Dizzy, and she's strong enough in like that scenario where she's okay. But besides that, she's definitely probably closer to here than anywhere else. I really don't want to put her in budget because she's a collab 5-star, right? But DJ Bazaar. Okay, so DJ Bazaar is another unit that got buffed along with like what, Shu, C Armin. And unlike them, I still think he's bad, right? Like, and I said this. I said when the buffs came out, I don't think his buffs did enough, like, to make him usable. So rip DJ Bazaar still. Doris. Basically the same thing as Arcades. She's a budget pick, right? But Doris is definitely stronger than Momo is in what they do. Eaton, kind of a budget pick. Basically only for like anti-cleave budget pick, but you know, he exists. Elena. I think Elena goes here. So, as a pure counter pick to like cleave teams now, Elena is definitely a little bit too difficult to gear up correctly. You either need too much ER or too much speed. Like you need like both a lot of speed and ER, and you can't hit those numbers to a point where she actually does enough against cleave teams, right? So she's still gonna get outsped by like even like the second fastest unit on a cleave team after her push, right? So because of like the fact that 99% of players can't reach that gear threshold, she's basically down here because she's still okay against like non-cleave teams with a lot of AoE. But those teams can be like frenzied out, right? I mean, those teams can frenzy out the Elena player. So she does require a pretty specific comp around her that can go deep into frenzy, because that's probably what's gonna happen if you pick her. Elvelt, one of the most recent buffs. I'm gonna put it here. Needs more info. I do have mine built. I really haven't used her as much though. I'll be honest, like my playstyle doesn't really use her as often as I would like to. But she does have some decent usages, like she's good against, if you have her on Symbol, she is a guaranteed hit on stuff like, you know, Remnant Violet. If you have a Soul Burn, like good against the degen RBs, stuff like that. Gives the attack buff. Relatively easier to gear because she doesn't need crit chance. Although I will say that if we do have crit chance on her, or can get a crit chance buff, her S1, so my S1 is not Molan, right? And it does, even when it crits, it does a lot of damage. Like, her S1 is surprisingly strong, right? So I don't even know if the no crit chance build is right anymore, just because of like how much damage she can push out, even like into like Frenzy 2 or 3. So, but right now she's definitely still in testing phases, where it's probably going to be a couple of weeks, maybe even a month into the season starting, where we'll know where she falls. Elson, Enot, Irvalin. Okay. Fairy Tail. Right now, Fairy Tail is a strong pick. She's definitely not as prevalent as she was when she came out. A lot of that, again, has to do with the fact that people have just, like, built so many counters to her that she's almost always a late pick to be like a force ban at this time. She does have the benefit of being one of the better strippers in the game. It's like right now she's definitely used more for the fact that she strips buffs versus her provoke. I feel like, right? Like, which is really weird to think about, but that's just like what the meta is right now. The fact that she gets unbuffable is more important than the fact that she has a unique and very strong debuff in Redirected Provoke. Okay, Ferelitica, Cleave, Falcon and Cleary. So right now she's a strong pick. This is a pretty easy slot to put her into. She's definitely, so like, I don't think she's not as good as Roz right now. I feel like Roz is a little bit better at the moment. Falcon Cleary is pretty good against the Golden Boys, right? But in just about every other situation, she's worse than Roz, right? So it just depends. Like, if you only want to counter like strictly the Golden Boy composition, and I would say that when they have like 3 of them, okay, then I think Falcon and Cleary is probably better than, it might be like a little bit better than Roz. But if they have like 2 of them and you ban one of them, or you have one of them, or if like they just don't exist in that particular game, then Roz just brings a little more to the table with his dual attack, defense break, immunity, stuff like that. Still a really strong unit though, right? Like you shouldn't neglect her if you have the opportunity to. Flan, Tieria. All right, G Fergus. So G Fergus is at the moment very strong. His passive is honestly one of the most busted passives in the game. Like, in this current, like, with the current unit pool we have, that's good. It would be more manageable if we had, like, more units that were good, that had stuff like Restrict. Or if we had more accessible, really strong single target damage that could deal with him. The big issue is that a lot of the really strong single target damage is really squishy, or just like not that good. Like the 2 best single target damage dealers in the game, I believe, are LQC and Remnant Violet. I would say best, I mean like the 2 best like burst damage ones that can like do their damage really early on. Right? Like, of course, a unit like Fire Robbie can do a lot of really strong single target damage, but it's gonna take a couple of turns for it to do that. And the fact that 2 of the units that can really check G Fergus, like, passive, are MO5s, I think is a problem. The other thing, too, is that there's just so much AoE in the game. Like, a lot of the really strong DPS units have AoE, just have AoE on their kit, which makes him, I guess Spectre, right, is a good single target damage dealer. Probably like the best one. But again, she's also an MO 5-star, right? So he also facilitates a lot of offensive teams because his attack buff on his S3 and the stun makes a big difference. On top of that, I'll talk about this later when I get to like Emil Crow somewhere, wherever he is here. But he helps fill some of the like weaknesses that the other characters in this upper echelon of units have because of his CR push passive. Glenn. Gloomy Rain. Okay. As much as I would like to put Gloomy Rain, like, not into Don't Pick, you, even though she's my favorite character, you probably should not pick her. And this is just because she doesn't have enough stats, right? If she was a 4-star character, she'd probably be, and if she had like immunity to provoke, right? If she had those 2 things, she'd be up here, right? Automatically. But her base stats are just too low. New. I mean Godmother. Don't pick. Okay. Emil Haste is... He's like... He can be honestly anywhere in these 3 tiers. He's a kind of pick to RB, yes. But he's also picked sometimes when RB's not in the game. I do feel, though, like, against RB, he's definitely stronger than these units here. Without RB, I think he's a little bit weaker than these units here, right? And that's the weird thing. So, like, I think most of the time, though, he's only going to be picked when RB or when, like, Kevin revives in the match. But he doesn't have to be picked when RB is there, right? Like, he's strong enough where... and used in situations outside of just being a pure counter pick that he's not here. But he's definitely skirting this line. A lot has to do with the fact that, you know, he brings he has damage mitigation when his S3 is available. He has the heal, obviously. He does true damage. So Fire Haste. He's good to use as an imprint for Emil Haste. Hatan. Hazel, Helga. Alright. Holiday Euphine is another counter pick. And she's a counter pick that is difficult to slot into a team because, again, G. Fergus, Animal Crow really hurt her a lot. But she is easier to get going than Elena in her specific counter scenarios. Mainly because you can actually hit the gear requirements for Holiday Euphine. Not easily, right? But they're definitely more accessible than, like, Elena's, who I believe are, like, just about impossible to hit and have her actually do what he wanted to do against Cleve. Well-built Holiday Euphines against teams that don't have stuff like a G. Fergus or Emil Crow, they actually do. They not only can they do a lot of damage, but can really screw up, like, you know, stuff like obviously Bazaar, but like other debuffers too. If you have it built with like some bulk, you know, protected with like stuff like FCC or like something like that. Just start going to work. Like maybe get another barrier going. So definitely a unit you should probably have in your counter pool if you have her. Just know that, like other units with a lot of AoE, to be wary of you know, G. Fergus, Emil Crow. Gerardo. Ian? Ruzid. I guess Ruzid is like budget, right? Don't have anything better. He uses a speed imprint. But, you know, even then, no. No, you probably don't pick him. There are better speed imprints in the game. And if you just want a unit that's fast to speed boost, you use Judith instead. Green Violet. Rare. Okay. I'm gonna admit, recently, I lost to a Green Violet. Although, to be fair, I really wasn't, like, my draft is really bad. because I was testing out some, you know, some compositions, but you definitely have to have a very specific like play style to use him, and really good gear. Green Velona, Jet, the worst character in the game. Judge Kisei. I'll put him in Cleave. That's like the only time she sees usage. So at one point, I tried using a fast debuff, like debuffer, Judge Kisei. It's just, that's a little bit too hard to do, and it requires too much, Oh wait, and that was before, Fergus was in the meta. Right? Like, now with Fergus in the meta, I don't think you can really do that. Although, so, Cleave teams right now, they don't run Judge Kisei. Like, at higher rankings, usually. They had to dedicate more slots to fight against all the anti-Cleave in the game. And Judge Kisei doesn't really do that. OP Secret has basically taken Judge Kisei's slot in those teams. Outside of Cleave, again, the only build for Judge Kisei is fast effectiveness. The only issue with that is that, one, you have to have a soul burn, or you have to precede her with a strip that you know is not going to be banned, right? So like Cerise, basically. The other issue is that her S3 is not even guaranteed to reset the skills, right? So she requires a lot of investment, not only in herself, but in your entire like composition. And even then, sometimes she doesn't work, right? And after that, she doesn't do anything. I mean, yeah, she has a defense break on her S1, but when you compare that to like a unit like Emil Taiwan, right? Who also will sometimes just like not land any stuns or stuff like that, right? On his S3. And that actually happens a lot because 80 times right now aren't built with effectiveness usually. The thing is that even after that happens, A Taiwan still does stuff, right? He like protects against some debuffs. He does some damage. He has a good S1 with the provoke, which I would argue that on his team is better than the defense break that just Kisei gives, right? He's also a little bit tankier, usually. His overall gear requirements for his build compared to the Judge Kisei debuff build is easier to attain. And that's like really the difference. After she does her... and also, he doesn't require, like, having like 2 to 3 other units on the team to actually make him, like, viable compared to Judge Kisei, who definitely does need a couple, like, you know, other units, like book holders, a stripper to precede her sometimes, stuff like that, right, just in case. To be useful. Which really upsets me, because my Judge Kisei is plus 15. Judith. Budget. Karen. Kawana. Budget. Okay. Really briefly on Kawana. Her base speed is pretty high, and she has a stun on her skill, which is like the only reason why she's not in Don't Pick. So, yeah. Calric. He's good enough to being rare, right? Like, there are occasions where his Soul Burn, which I believe now ignores ER, can be really, really good. But he's probably a little bit. He's like just a little bit too like he just dies like right after he does that, right? So if the other team has like any sort of sustain at all, it's not good for him. Fire Ken is a don't pick, and Fire Ken is an advanced spot for a couple of reasons. One, a frenzy. He takes too long to rep up his damage, and when he does, he dies. He also doesn't have like as much game-winning potential as his fire competition in Robbie. We haven't got to yet, but we will. Ricardo, Kiki Rat, Kyrus, Kitty. Okay. Kitty's a counter pick right now, although because the Fairy Tail series teams have become less common, Kitty has also become less common too. I do think right now, against that specific composition, so the debuff Kitty, like the debuff Cerise Fairy Tail team, Kitty Clarissa is the best counter to that team. Besides maybe Cesarado, right? And that's because, when I say counter, I mean like individual single unit counter. Like obviously, like there are like probably better like 2 unit combos against that, but for that 1 unit you have to bring in to maybe be a force ban, it's Kitty. And that's because a lot of players have started to slow down their Fairy Tails a little bit to like boost the effectiveness up to like 200%. And the only unit in the game that can reasonably hit like the numbers of ER to like almost always resist that effectiveness is Kitty Clarissa, and that's because she's a warrior who can carry Strack, right? Who also has a self imprint of ER. So if you have a max Strack or close to max Strack, if you have enough gear to get it to like 230 to like 230 to 240ish speed with like 220 to like 230 ER like before Strack, build Kitty. Like also make sure she has bulk too, because you don't want it to die, right? In the meantime, because a lot of players they will focus her down. When you draft her too, you have to draft her with offensive characters. So like she's a offensive counter to those teams, because her dual attack on the S1 will bring the highest attack target. A lot of the times, it's probably right to use the S3. So even if they save the S3 on the Fairy Tail and don't kill Kitty, unless you're very confident she's going to survive, to the next round, it's actually probably the right call to use the S3 preemptively, like even before like the S3, because you want to push I think you want to push the damage in beforehand. But even with all of her like bonuses to ER, she is still difficult to build, I would say. On the plus side, she only really needs one Molagora in her S3. So, also, not really a factor on this list, but really good for PvE too. So, okay. Kisina Ai. You probably should not pick her. There is like a couple of people who, kind of use her as like a meme, right? And sometimes she looks insane, but Kisina Ai is a unit that if she was like 10, maybe even like 10 base, because she's really slow. She's like, I believe, the slowest unit in the game. If she was like base 100 speed, I actually think she'd be pretty good. But because she's like so slow, she's really hard to use. Blue Crow. I think goes up here now. Blue Crow at the moment is one of the only real knight counters, not giving counters, but like checks to Golden Boys, because his S3 is one single target, a single target nuke, which is very valuable. He has Aureus, and if he has some ER on him, he's not going to be like stunned by stuff like FCC provokes or the A Taiwan stuns, stuff like that. He brings the defense buff, which is really good. You can argue that Roz might do a little bit more utility, but the fact that he has the S3 Crow is really valuable. On top of that, he is especially good against Fire Robbie, who is also really good. So the fact that he basically checks another meta unit too, in addition to checking Golden Boys, is a pretty big thing. Here's Babby Cleary. Let's put her here. Okay, Landy. Landy still remains really powerful. She's not as good as she was early last season, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Fergus is now in the meta, right? And this is what I want to like. She's really, really good into stuff like obviously MO Crow, right? DN. Like, a big thing, reason why she's not as good now is because units that were good, like, before, like, DN, even stuff like A-Raz, other, like, bulkier bruiser units that were, like, very common are less common now. And the bruiser and like the other the units that are being used, even though they can be considered bruisers, you have like Fire Robbie, stuff like Fergus who gets to Sierra Bush, Bazaar who strips off the guiding light, stuff like that. But just in terms of how much carry potential a unit has, Landy is definitely near the top of the list, and she's strong. She's like Arby, where she has a lot of counters or counter play, but she can still rip through, like, enemy compositions, even if they have, like, a counter or two set up. So I'm gonna add another tier here. I'm gonna call it pre-SA units. So I'll put like stuff like the, just so people don't get confused when they see the list, you know. So just these units that have SCs that are like not and don't pick. Okay, Emil Crow. Wait, where'd he go? Wait. God damn it. Where is he? I'm not kidding. Oh, here he is. Okay. Obviously, he goes up here. I think right now, I think in a vacuum, Emil Crow is the strongest unit in the game. He's one of two units I feel like need to be addressed somehow. Unlike the other one, who I think could be addressed with simply making units that counter him, Emil Crow is a unit where I feel like actually needs to be nerfed. And I don't know how I nerf him. I think things like reducing, like increasing his S3 cooldown by 1, reducing the amount of damage his S3 does. Only given a barrier the first time an AoE hits his team per turn, right? Like stuff like that, I think would be, you know, reasonable, or like some sort of combination of them. Because think about this, people are they're like trying really, really hard to find ways to counter Emil Crow. And he's still really, really strong, right? It's like, the difference between Emil Crow and Arby is that Emil Crow can be picked first in like almost every situation, and you can still draft in a way that you have a pretty good chance. Arby, if you draft him first, unless you're like a cleaver, right? Build a very specific team and have a specific pre-ban, stuff like that, you can be counterpicked out the wazoo and just lose in the draft. He's a much safer first pick than the other, you know, than something like Arby is, and he has he has the utility with immunity and, you know, anti-AoE barrier, stuff like that. Does damage on the S3. It's true damage, by the way. He doesn't, like, his stat distribution is pretty lenient for a character, you know, in this tier. Like, and even with characters like Landy existing, stuff like that, sometimes it just doesn't matter. Like, he just does a little bit too much at the moment. He's like definitely one of those I don't know what the balance team was thinking when they put him out. And the problem here, too, is that I don't think they can fix it, like, again, by building counter units to him. Unless the counter units for it against him are, like, insane, right? Like doing something like unless they have a unit that simply stops HP scaling, like, abilities from like, doing the HP scaling damage. Like, imagine that. Imagine if they made a unit where its passive was all attacks that have a modifier, besides attack, don't use that modifier, right? Like, now, would that unit be too good? Maybe, right? Because it obviously hurts stuff like Emerald Crowd, but it hurts, like, you know, Blue Crowd too, Alexia, right? Like, it hurts, like, Find Maya, you know, so that may be a little bit too good as a passive, honestly. But, like, that's like the type of bonkers passive you would need to have something to have, like, counterplay against Emerald Crowd right now, in my opinion. So think about that, and then think about how much easier it would be just to nerf him. Lots. Elena. Firelitica. Put her in rare. She has some niche usage, but probably not quite enough. She's definitely she's usable once every, like, couple hundred fights. Okay, like, if you have nothing else to do and just want to, like, speed contest, right? Because her base speed is really high, you can pick her there. But obviously, if you're higher up, I don't recommend it. Lilius. Right now, Lilius is a pretty strong pick right now. She's definitely better than, I believe, Roz and Flurry, because she has a cleanse on the S3, and the cleanse right now is pretty important. There are basically only two builds for her that are viable. Not viable, but, like, the two main builds will be ER or Bruiser, right? So if you're not going, so, like, yes, you can just build her with, like, tank stats, but that's probably not enough. You either want it to be pushing damage, or you want it to be used against, like, the Taiwan, Fairy Tail, stuff like that for S3 cleanse. Both builds now are, so to be clear, if you're a newer player, you won't be able to do the ER or the Bruiser build, right? So you do have to build a tank, like, just basic tank stats, like decent speed, health, you know, defense, stuff like that, right? And that's fine. But as you get higher up into the rankings, you will have to, like, choose either the Bruiser build, which is, you know, higher speed overall than the ER build, crit chance, crit damage, some attack, right? That build requires heavy mole investment. So, like, max S3, like max S2 in all builds, like a few points into S1 even, right? Or the ER build, you're looking at, like, 210 to 220 speed. Again, decent health and defense. At least 220 ER, and even 220 is low, I would say. So, like, higher up, you definitely want a little bit more. But both builds are pretty strong right now. She does require, again, because she's a support unit, she's gonna require some other units around her, but her utility is really good at the moment in the current meta. Lilibet. I would say you probably should not pick her. As much as I dislike that, because I really like Lilibet as like design wise and like character wise. I think a big thing. I don't really know what I would do with her to make it more viable at the moment, because I feel like she's like a buff away from being like usable. The thing is though that she doesn't really need she doesn't need to be buffed. I mean, she does, I think, but it's more like the meta doesn't need her to be buffed. So LQC. Right now, LQC is a really strong pick, I believe. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that she wrecks dark units. And unless you have Golden Boys, and even if you do have like a couple of them, she is really strong because she does a lot of damage. She has some self-sustain. Again, one of the premier single target damage dealers in the game at the moment. So Rowana is a counter pick against SSB. Also decent against stuff like Fairy Tail Cerise because of the dual attacks and the counters, stuff like that. Rowana is one of the few RGB units that I think is a must pull. If she has a banner. That's like how good she is as a counter pick. Right now, I think the optimal build is actually something like counter with like 150 ER. If you with like decent, with like 170-ish speed, if you can do something like that, that's like the god build right now. The reason you want that ER is because of Archdemon Shadow, because Rowana is not only good against Cerise, like Fairy Tail, SSB, stuff like that, she's also really good against Archdemon Shadow because her passive procs when ADS is S2 procs, which is really good for Rowana. And a lot of ADSs don't have effectiveness anymore because they want to be pushing either their bulk or their attack damage, right? And because of that, they have to use souls to soul burn the Rowana. And if the Rowana has a Stellar Harpa, which has a chance to cleanse debuffs when she's hit, well, that's even better for her. So Rowana definitely one of the strongest counter picks in the game. Almost always a force ban if she's picked. Luna buffs when? Oh wait, hold on. There we go. Melissa. Right now, Melissa is a don't pick. Unfortunately, yes, she does have some very niche abilities to counter Remnant Violet, but there were just so many things that counter Remnant Violet, like just hitting him counters him, which happens all the time, basically. Teams are just a little bit too bulky now. Where even then, there's a so like, to be fair, if Melissa always traded 1-for-1 against a Remnant Violet, I do think that she'd be like, you know, like counter or rare. But because sometimes she doesn't even do that, right? Sometimes you don't even trade 1-for-1. She's not worth it. Especially because she doesn't bring enough utility. Like Elvelt, who does like a similar thing against Remnant Violet, right? As Melissa does. But at least Elvelt brings like an attack buff for your team. And potentially a defense break too, right? For the enemy team. So she definitely has more utility, and her damage output is actually higher than Melissa's. So Marissa right now, I think, is in budget. I've tried her out a little bit. Her use cases are actually a little bit different than Remnant Violets are, even though the passives are like surprisingly similar. She be used as a speed imprint, stuff like that. Also, at times she can be used to like punish squishier fairy tale compositions, because like, you know, 70% to evade her S3 is honestly, at times, probably a better chance than the ER you can get on like an ER character. So just like percentages wise, she might be a better pick than like even a Lilius or a Destina. Well, maybe not Destina, because Destina's element advantage, right? But you know, some characters like that, I guess the fairy tale. But even then, that's very specific and based on like your current gearing. So put it here. Okay, Emil or Minta. Emil or Minta's in a vacuum is a strong unit, right? Obviously, she has a 100% stun on her S3. She has unhealable. She has the burns. She has a good, good passive, stuff like that. She's definitely hurt the most, though, by just stuff like Emil Crow, G Fergus, and stuff like that existing. Also, all the anti-debuffers existing, too. It's just that the current meta isn't really kind to her. And unfortunately, she's one of those units where, because her kit is just on paper so strong, I don't think they can't buff her again. She has to wait until something happens that makes her usable, right? Okay, FCC. Put them up here. Oh, these are not in any order, by the way, within the tiers. FCC is still a very, very strong unit. Probably, I'd say, the second safest first pick in the game after Emil Crow. And that's because FCC is, one, she's not as good with the meta units like Emil Crow, A Taiwan, G Fergus, stuff like that, as Emil Crow is. And she has more counterplay now than those units too. and even on her damage builds, stuff like that, she doesn't. Her utility, I would argue, is lower than Emil Krauss, and her damage is lower too. Right? Like that's the other thing. Like LQC destroys FCC, unfortunately, and like other units too, like OP Cigarette, right, stuff like that. Like they definitely come out with like ways to fight FCC a lot more than they have with Emil Crow. So, but still a really strong unit, right? Like arguably, you know, upper echelon here, like pretty close to up here, you know, but not quite. The Great Mortellix. Don't pick Mortellix. By the time Mortellix does anything useful, it's too late, right? That's basically what it is. Mooey. Mooey has a strip and a stun, right? Which is strong enough where she's not a don't pick, but she's definitely at the lower rung of units that have a strip, right? And a lot of it has to do with that she doesn't have Unbuffable. At least, wait, I don't think she does. But that's like really what it is. OB Secret. Op Secret is... Okay, I know she's used sometimes in not cleave, but most of the time she is a cleave. She is a unit in cleave, and Op Secret is... I'll be honest, if you don't have her, you probably should not cleave. That's how good, that's how, like, I think necessary she is to the composition. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that she counters a lot of the counter units in cleave. So, like, T-Surin, Kayron, you know, anything with, like, you know, like the barrier, stuff like that. She's just really good against those. And basically, if built well, and even though if the opponent knows she's built well, she's like, if she's a force man. So like a lot of times, if I'm finding a cleaver and they have Op Secret on the team, I always try to draft it in a way where I know I can ban it. Right? Like that's how good I think she is in that particular composition. Utterly. Okay. Pavel. I'll be nice to him and put him up here. So, the only time I saw a Pavel recently, he didn't do anything. Well, like, Pavel... No, like, cleaves don't run Pavel. I mean, they do sometimes, right? But they were just better. They were just like better options than him. That's the problem. He's not common in cleave. Oh, I'll put Green Fergus up here in budget. He's another unit that is greatly hurt Viable Crow and G-Fergus existing. Phyllis? Budget? You know what? Even, yeah. Blaze Dingo. So, Blaze Dingo has a little more usage than Pavel does, definitely. Actually, probably out of all these units here, he's definitely higher in usage in the rare category. But, you know what, honestly? He might be strong enough where I even move him up to here. But, like, not quite, you know... I feel like, in a vacuum, he's worse than, like, some units in here. In overall, like, usage, how much I see him, I've definitely seen more than units here, though, right? He's, like, borderline here and borderline here. Like, individually, I don't think he's as good as, like, A. Robbie, MLK, and 5 Cecilia, right? Maybe even Dizzy. But he's used, but I've seen him used more often than all these units, right? Honestly, probably combined. So, you know, I'll put it up here. Oh, it's like, it's really close. Because... he doesn't really, you know... He definitely doesn't do as much as, like, these characters here. But his usage, from what I've seen, is definitely higher than these units. Alright. Fire Robbie. We're up here. Fire Robbie is the premier fire damage dealer. I'm actually gonna move him down here. Because even though he does have more usage, I think the playstyle required to use him is so specific that I can't put him up here. Fire Robbie, the premier fire damage dealer in the game. The reason why she's so strong, one is her S1 is bonkers, her passive is bonkers, her S3 is bonkers. There are also not a lot of good water DPS in the game, which really helps her too. Ray is... Ray, okay, so here's the thing. Ray is 100% worse than Destina. Like, all tests and metrics have shown that Destina is the preferred Grass Soul Weaver to use against, like, the Fairy Tail composition. Like, even with Ray's ER like bonus he has over Destina. Well, I guess Destina has the EE, right? So, like, evens out, right? But even with all of that, Destina is still preferred. Why? Now, why? I don't actually know why. I think it's because Destina pushes with the S3 and with the S2. So... But I'm gonna put him here because in, like, the really, like, tanky compositions, sustain, right? Ray is better than Destina in those cases, but that requires a very specific playstyle and team composition that you're gonna use. That, honestly, I think is really boring, right? Like, I get annoyed at fights that go into, like, Frenzy 8. So I'm never gonna do it. But yeah, there's that. Remnant Violet, I think, is a situational pick right now. He is one of the strongest single target damage deals in the game. And the fact that one of the strongest single target damage deals in the game is only in situational, I think is a problem. Like, just shows, like, why Fergus is really powerful right now. The fact that one of the best, like, nukers in the game has so much counterplay to him, like Rysaria, even Elvelt, right? Again, the best counterplay to Remnant Violet, know what it is? Just hit him. You know, that's all you have to do. And it is surprisingly easy to hit him. It happens all the time. Now, the reason why there's a lot of counterplay to Remnant Violet, even though right now he's like, you know, not the best unit, is that the way his kit works is so like all or nothing that there has to be like that much counterplay to him, right? It's just like the way he's designed. There's like no middle ground where to it, unfortunately. But yeah, but you know, still a really good unit though, right? Okay, Green Rin, goes in the rare category. So there are players who use Green Rin. Most notably Clam, right? I believe is the most well-known user of her. Now obviously Clam has insane gear because he's one of the Asia he's one of the Asia qualifiers for. Actually, is Clam in Asia or KR? I think he's Asia. But qualifiers for E7WC, right? She does require like sustain builds, right? So being built with like tanky teams with like a single DPS carry, usually like a Landy or a Spectre, something like that. So definitely not, even though she's like a 4-star, and you probably have her pretty early, not a unit I recommend new plays to build. And even like endgame players, a lot of them, you still have to have like a whole team built around her kit. Okay, Rose Cleave, right? CR push, attack buff, Ruel. Ruel, right now is a situational pick. She used to be like borderline don't pick, but towards the end of last season, she started seeing a little more usage overall as like more bruiser type units were being raised up. Still not amazing because there is a lot of burst in the game from like Landy, Robbie, stuff like that, but she's not a dead pick anymore. She when picked against certain compositions, she either requires a ban or like just knowing that you can burst down her team before she does something like, you know, heal the SSB, right? Sageball. Sageball, I feel, might be the second strongest unit after Emil Crow in the game right now. Like, he's pretty close to A Taiwan. The difference is that A Taiwan's kit, even though it's really strong, has some counterplay to it, right? And I'm not saying that Sageball doesn't have counterplay to it, it's just that it's more that Sageball cycles so quickly, and has a huge single target nuke that has basically no counterplay at all on his S3, right? Besides killing him, and that's like really it. I feel like it's a problem, right? Now, can they make units that like counter Emil Ball? I think they can, right? Like, unlike Emil Crow, who I believe strictly needs to be nerfed, I think Emil Ball can exist like he is if they come out with like units that counter him. What would these units do? More stuff like Politis, maybe, or just things that like, you know, more like debuff counters, like Emma Lilibet, maybe, right? Added to the game, then more accessible. Will be okay too. But, hold on 1 second here. Alright. But yeah, will be okay too. But really strong. The only reason, I believe the only reason you don't see him as much is because he hasn't been rerun since his buff. Or at all, actually. And when he was nerfed, everybody traded him in for like another ML 5-star. So Fire Shuri is a speed imprint. Made Chloe. I would not pick her. I think out of all the ML5s in the game, May Chloe and DJ Bazaar, like DJ Bazaar, his kit has to be like reworked, right? They can't buff him more. He needs like a redesign. I think same thing for May. I think May Chloe, she can be buffed, but her buff has to be like pretty insane to be viable again. George Corvus, he's not good in RTA, but he's good enough in like other places where they're not going to change him, right? Warda Kisei is a situational pick right now. She's borderline strong. The only reason she's not strong is because Warda Kisei is actually one of the premier water damage dealers in the game. And a lot of this has to do with a couple of things. One is that she is really, really, really good against Fire Robbie. Her, like, honestly, her being, like, probably the best counter to Fire Robbie in the game is single-handedly probably enough of a reason to build it if you have one, right? Now, the reason why she's not as good as Fire Robbie is because she doesn't have as much carry potential as Fire Robbie. So, like, Fire Robbie is good against, like, stuff like Landy, Bazaar, but can also help carry your team against, like, the field. Blue Kisei is good against Fire Robbie and, like, a couple of other units, too, and that's it. Which is why she's not quite as prevalent. Kairon. Kairon's basically a counter pick right now, although he is among the hardest ones to use at the moment because a lot of the compositions he wants to counter either are too bulky or they have stuff like OP Secret, Viseria, Cerise. A lot of the things in the meta just like destroy him, unfortunately, because of they strip off his immunity, and without immunity, Kairon is pretty much worthless. But Green Sid. He's a speed imprint. Okay, SSB. At the moment, SSB she's a strong pick, but again, like other units, she is hurt by stuff like G Fergus and Emil Crow. Obviously, if you have G Fergus and Emil Crow on your team, SSB is pretty good if you plan to ban out stuff like Landy. But the fact that like stuff like even Bazaar exists too, and Rowana, just the amount of counterplay that SSB has makes her a little bit difficult to pick overall than it used to be. But still a unit that you have to consider, right, in the draft. Like, if your team can be destroyed by like an SSB, you kind of have to like draft around that fact. Yes, and with Solitarius coming eventually, SSB might even see a little bit less usage. Sigrid, even with her extinction, I don't think you should pick her. Booba says alright, Spez. I don't think Spez is good. Right? I know some people will argue with me on this, but when I saw his buffs originally, I said that I didn't think the buffs really did anything for him. I mean, they made him better, but Spez, the best I can describe him is he's like Charles. He requires a lot of RNG to do what he wants to, and even if he gets some of the RNG, unless he gets a lot of it, he doesn't quite do enough, right? The only reason why he's a little bit better than Charles is his element is better, and the way his RNG works is also a little bit better, right? But he's just not consistent enough. Overall, right? Like, you might notice, like, a lot of these units up here, they're very consistent in what they do. I guess besides Violet, right? But, whatever. Surin, Cleve, Sven, Tamarin. Alright, T-Surin. T-Surin is like borderline here and here, right? Like, her T-Surin, so T-Surin's like peak is like up here, right? But she has trouble being drafted right now, because of what the meta units are, right? Now, a very well geared T-Serin can like solo squish your teams or like teams without a lot of damage. But that's not really a thing that happens a lot, right? Like those are not teams that you fight a lot now. On top of that, like stuff like SSB really hurts her. Like Robbie's actually pretty strong. Like Lilius, you know, Bazaar, blue like Degen Arby's, right? These 4 units up here, just very problematic for her. Fight Tenebria, right now I would not pick her. And even though her kit is pretty strong, she's actually hurt the most by being fire element than anything else. I think. Kind of. I don't know, kind of. It's... In a vacuum, she's pretty good. But... It's hard to, like, pin down why she's not picked as much. Okay. Top model Lilica. I know the trend these days is actually picking her more situationally than a counter pick, because I have seen her being used like just not against RV, but just as like a speed unit. But I still think most of the time she's gonna be picked against like an RB, maybe against like a Rowana, something like that, right? Insane gear requirement, right? So, Troublemaker Crozet. So, Troublemaker Crozet is a decent unit that like stuff like MO, like Green Rin, or like a Ray, stuff like that. Blaze Dingo, a Robbie, requires a very specific playstyle to make work. Otherwise, there are just better knights in the game. But in like a certain vacuum, he's a good unit. Blue Taiwan. Alright. Spectre. Put it here. So, Spectre remains to be a strong unit. She is hurt by all the AoE in the game at the moment, but you can build it. But people have started building her now to be more bulky. Some players have actually elected to drop a book and put on like Chatty. Although that's more of like a Guild Wars thing, right? But one of the things that makes Spectre really dangerous right now is that her combined with Fergus is one of the deadliest combos in the meta right now. Like, maybe only second to, like, Fergus plus Landy. Right? Like, those two together are just really, really good. Oh, and on Vildred being good for the speed imprint, yes, he can be used for his speed imprint. The thing is that most teams are only going to... most Cleave teams, at most, will only dedicate 2 slots to his speed imprint. And those slots are going to be filled by Water Shuri, Celeste, Green Sid, Fire Shuri, or Fire Surd. Like, all those 5 units will be picked for a speed imprint before Green Vildred is. These 3, because they have Actually, I don't know about Green Sid. I know Fire Servant and Fire Shuri, they have better speed imprints because they have more speed. Celeste is a initiator, and Watcher Shuri can be used to nuke down like a bulky target. On top of that, getting their imprints is relatively easier than getting ones for a Green Vildred, who honestly, you're gonna use your Green Vildred imprints for your Arbiter Vildred if you have him a lot of the times, right? So like endgame players who I'm going to assume most of them will have Arbiter Vildred will have to have like not only multiple Green Vildreds to feed their Arbiter Vildred, but then get even more Green Vildreds somehow after that, right? So like that's why he just requires too much investment, and even as a main cleaver, there are too many other options that are like cleave is kind of a misnomer now, where cleave teams don't actually really cleave anymore. They basically just set up single target burst damage these days, right? Like they set up like for CDOM. Like the cleave is like initiating attack mode, whatever like that, whatever Op Secret says, right? That's the cleave in the cleave team. It's really about the nuke, the big nukes that you get from them. Rivian. Rivian is like in a weird spot where sometimes she's used as a counter, sometimes she can be like a situational pick, sometimes, you know. I think this is where like she generally belongs. Yes, she's not. Yes, sometimes she's just a pick that you choose for like a strategy, but a lot of times when I see her, she is being picked for the immunity itself. In a lot of cases, she's picked when ML Crow is banned, and you have like a debuff heavy team, and you want something that's good against the Cesarado, right? That's where Vivian comes up most of the time. Okay, Yuna. Like a lot of other units, Yuna is extremely hurt by G Fergus. Actually, unlike the other, now like Yuna actually does a lot of Yuna does a lot of damage. The only reason why she's not like down and don't pick is because her damage output is actually really high. She is destroyed by like ML Crow and G Fergus still, but still, if those two are like not in the match, and you have a pretty well built Yuna, you're gonna do a lot of damage. Xeno. Alright, Elmo Ren is among the best speed contesters in the game. Really strong against Cerise, obviously. Her biggest weakness is 15%. With Lucy here. Okay. ADS. ADS is probably the biggest snowball unit in the game. If ADS gets going against a team that can't really, like, do anything reasonable against her, you're gonna win pretty quickly. She's really good against Arby. She's really good against, like, Remnant Violet, stuff like that. The reason for this is that her seal happens before the attack, so it ignores the hit chance, stuff like that, right? She's not higher because she has a lot of counterplay. Like, again, she's really weak against, like, Rowana, SSB, Mo Crow, A Taiwan, G Fergus, right? Are all units that deal with her pretty well, and all those units are very common. So you can't just, like, blindly pick her right away. So she's definitely, like, a later in the draft pick. But just in terms of raw, you know, do something about this unit, or she wins the game, Amaru is pretty high up there. And she's an example of a unit that she can never be buffed. She has, again, one of the highest snowball potential of any unit in the game. And if she was, like, even a little more consistent, she'd be too good, right? Like, all that has to happen, because, like, eventually, things that, like, counter, like, Mo Crow and stuff like that will come out, right? And then, what happens to Amaru, right? It's like, just, you know, she's just too good at that point. Which is, okay, Politis. Politis is the premier anti-cleave right now. Politis is single-handedly completely killed cleave in RTA. She's almost always the force ban for those compositions. Her passive against cleave is just really, really good. Now, there are basically two ways to build her I've seen. One is heavy effectiveness, and one is having more damage. If you don't have a high-level Abyssal Crown, I think you have to do damage, right? If you have a high-level Abyssal Crown, you can go effectiveness, right, and do less damage. But that's really what it is. 230 to 240 speed. Probably closer to 240 is the safe point at higher elos, because the secondary unit is probably going to be fairly fast, and you want to try to, you know, cut the second unit if possible. And Emma Lilibet, I think, is a situational pick right now. So yes, she's kind of a counter pick to debuffers, but you can even pick her. I've seen players pick her even against only one debuffer. So, like, Caesarado is usually only picked if there are at least two debuffers on the enemy team, right? Emma Lilibet's kit is strong enough where I've seen it pick with, I guess, only one debuffer. And sometimes it gets none of them, although that's rare, right? I think she's definitely underrated by, like, not the top tier players, I would say. And I feel like as more players get her and start getting her better gear, her usage rate is probably going to climb up a little bit, right? But right now, this is where I would slot her into. Okay, there are a couple units that we don't have on this list that came out recently, though. One of them is, I say a couple, only one, right? Ida. Oh, no, there were two. Ida and Kawana. So I'll talk about them very quickly. Emma Kawana, she's a Katie's hunt unit, so she's a dope pick, basically. All right, and Kana. Kana is a Grass Expo unit, so you don't pick her either. But the other one is who? Ida. From what I understand, Ida has actually been seeing experimentation, right? Now, is this gonna pan out into next season? I don't think so. I don't think Ida is quite good enough to make the cut, but if you have investment in her, if you pulled her, right, don't do anything with her right now because she's probably not gonna be good enough when the real push comes. But she does have a surprising amount of potential from what I understand. But anyway, this is the list here. If you want to know just what to build in general, obviously if you have any of the units here, so these 4 and these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, these 12 units here, and you want to do good in PvP, build these units, right? You should also probably build all of these units too if you have them. Honestly. So these 3 tiers are units that you should definitely look to build. After that, you build these depending on playstyle, and you build these to fill out your roster for counter picks against situations. Yes. Well, I'm gonna save a screenshot to it, and I'll post it to my Discord, which you'll be able to see. Right there. This video will also be going up on my YouTube channel, which is kind of meta because I'm saying it during the video. But you'll be able to rewatch this there at your leisure. Again, I do want to preface this by end this by saying what I said at the beginning, that this tier list is based on my opinions. I am a high level player, but I do not have all the units, and the way I draft does dictate what units I feel are really strong and what I don't feel are quite as strong. Because again, some units are going to be stronger against me than maybe against another player, right? And vice versa. Some players will be stronger against other players, and maybe I can deal with them pretty easily with my playstyle. On top of that, the meta is always shifting. Like most games with PvP, the meta shifts start at the top and will slowly trickle down as you go lower down the ranks. So, in Bronze, Silver, Gold, you're not going to be as affected by meta shifts as the top tier players. The meta can change in High Champ Legend, within the half a day, right? Sometimes you'll just see certain units being run a lot in one pocket of a time zone, and then 6 hours later that unit is gone completely for some reason. right? Like that's just how it works higher up. But in general, this should stay true for like if you just want to get the masters in general for like maybe like the first half of next season, or at least until we see like other units come out or like buff change and stuff like that. But in the terms of staying at like high champ legend, I'm not gonna lie, some of this is gonna be outdated like as early as like a month into the season, right? So like probably halfway through the next season, there will be another list that like goes over this again. But anyway, I'm on Neptune. Thank you for watching the video. As always, check me out at Twitch at twitch.tv/SmileNeptune. Thank you. Nep out.